I'm Christy Hemingway, host of Ed Curation, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Ninth Grade Experience Podcast. I'm your host, Chris Dutchko. Ninth grade can be challenging. Let's experience it together. And we're almost to the end. We made it to the month of June here, and we're excited to be ending the school year, but we do want to leave you with lots of good content over the summer. So we have interviews lined up. We're going to be still putting episodes out over the summer, and we'll be updating all the social medias and all the other things. But today we're going to catch up with one of the newer people in our building, though she's not new now because she's been here for a full year. We're going to be talking to Miss Rosemary Lamparella, who is in charge of our S.T.E.P program here. And she's going to be talking about positive childhood experiences and mental health. We just concluded Mental Health Awareness Month in May. So she actually had laryngitis, so she couldn't join us during May. But we're excited to bring this to you, and it's a longer episode, but there's lots of good stuff that you can carry with you to the summer, and lots of good tips and strategies on mental health and how to incorporate that into your daily routine over the summer and into next school year as well too. So take some time and enjoy this one. We'll be making sure we put all the different clips and stuff up onto TikTok and YouTube shorts, and lots of different ways for you to interact with the podcast as well too. So if you want to go back and listen to any other episodes as you're getting ready to go into summer and you need some, refreshers on things, or if you're going to be a new freshman coming up to Emmaus High School, go to ninthgradeexperience.com. You can check out all the episodes there. As you get ready for the school year next year, or want to wind down and reflect on what happened during your ninth grade year. So we'll have more episodes to come here as we close out the school year. Hopefully everyone's doing well with your exams and everything else. And we're excited to bring you this conversation with our S.T.E.P coordinator, Miss Lamparella. So welcome everybody to this episode of the Ninth Grade Experience Podcast. And we're ending the school year here. We're at the end of May, and recording an episode here about mental health awareness. And I know Mental Health Awareness Month was May, but when your guest has laryngitis through most of May, it makes for a really difficult podcast. But we're joined today by Miss Rosemary Lamparella, who is new to our building this year. She is part of the S.T.E.P program here at Emmaus High School, and she's very passionate about mental health for students and trying to help students to overcome those challenges. And she's been doing that all year in her new program. And we're excited to be able to pull her away for a couple minutes here to talk about things leading into the summer and some definite things that you can use maybe in the next school year as well too. So Ms. Lamparella, thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
So if you don't know where Mrs. Lamparella is located in the building, she is in room 312, which is kind of between the hallways there near the main office behind the wooden doors. So she's there with her students in that room there. So if you've never seen her around the building before, it's June. So there she is. So like all first-time guests on the show, we like to ask about their ninth grade experience to kind of, bring everybody together here. So like we always tell the adults, you never have to mention the year or where you went if there's any incriminating evidence, but we also like to hear about everyone's ninth grade experience. So why don't you start by telling us what that was like?
Sure. It's probably very different from Emmaus High School students today. So I grew up in kind of like a small town. So I had a graduating class of 78
Ooh.
students. So in my freshman year, half of my class was the same students I went to first grade with. So I knew the students really well for almost 8 years. So that was kind of a different experience. It was a Catholic school. I think we had a total of like 300 students in the entire building.
Mm-hmm.
It was, I won't say when it was, but I mean, I definitely remember having a typewriting class. So very different. And we did have like a computer. There was one of those extra large computers with a big tube in the back. So my experience was, I was really shy. I actually was a very shy, quiet kind of kid. I had a small group of what I would say are very close friends. I'm still really good friends with someone that I've known since 7th grade. We're still best friends all those years later. And I would consider myself like not as academically motivated as I probably was when I went to college. So I was probably like a BC student in high school. And then for some reason, when I got to college, it was really important to me that I get all A's.
And
And
we
so,
and we see that a lot too with students here as well. They like, they're okay students here, and then once they get to college, they're like, oh, I'm going to
Mhm.
start trying now.
Yeah.
So it's not uncommon to see that. We have a similar-ish kind of experience. My high school was also small. It was a Catholic school as well too.
Mm.
Our class had about 115 kids in it,
Mhm.
and then about 400 total in the school. So again, small environment, so a lot different than being here at Emmaus with almost 3,000 people.
Yeah.
So it's definitely a unique challenge, lots of different individuals. So we often like to ask adults too, like, was there something like a memory or moment in your ninth grade year that kind of led you to where you are today in your current position? A
Mhm.
lot of times, students will be able to identify some sort of thing or event, that they carry with them, or a teacher will be like, oh yeah, I remember this happened. So then this was something that motivated me to get into education. Did you have an experience like that in your ninth grade year?
Not so much. I actually had a whole other career before I started teaching. So my undergrad is actually interior design and housing, and I was an interior designer for almost 15 to 20ish years before I went back to school for teaching in my 30s. So, and I got my teaching certification through DeSales. Then afterwards, I got my master's there.
So
So,
a lot of times we talk to adults, like I'm also somebody that did not go into education to start. I was a journalism major. So, interior design, I saw that and kind of doing some research on you. I thought that was kind of interesting. So why the change from interior design to education? Because I know we have a lot of students here that are interested in lots of different things. So to hear
sure.
somebody that might have been in a career like that, that's kind of a cool career, but I would imagine it's kind of a difficult one to get a foothold in.
It was, and I will say that, one of the things that I wish I had had more experience, and I think is an opportunity that kids have now in high school that I didn't have coming from a small high school, is really the career that I had chosen really didn't fit my lifestyle, and it also didn't fit my personality. So even though I enjoyed being an interior designer, I really liked getting to know my clients very personally and spending one-to-one time with them. Sounds like a teacher, right?
Yep.
So, and so I did really good with the personal connections, and I enjoyed doing that, but I never really found it very fulfilling. The other piece of it is that, when you do interior design work, a lot of the job potential is in the cities like New York and Philadelphia, and that wasn't really my lifestyle choice either. And I didn't really know that until I got into the field.
And that's a message for like ninth grade students
Hmm.
or any students that are listening, is like thinking about like the career versus the lifestyle. And it's a
Hmm.
conversation that we even have with our children at home too. It's like, that was the same thing for me. I was a sports writer. And then when you get out of school and you start going, like sports are all nights and weekends. And
Hmm.
when is the majority of the people in your family available to hang out and do things? Nights and weekends. So like
Correct.
making sure that you kind of think about the career that you want versus, just chasing whatever it is that you think you might want to do. I think those are all like, it took us into adulthood to figure those things out. But, sometimes for kids to even start thinking about things like that, I think is an interesting, piece of the high school experience and ninth grade as well, too, kind of having that idea. So why the change from design to school? I know you kind of said it's more that personal connection, but, was there a light bulb moment that was like, you know what, I'm going to go into education now?
I mean, I had my daughter. So when I had my daughter, I think, I started to think about like her schedule and how could I spend as much time with her as possible, but also do something kind of fulfilling. And I actually had an experience. I mean, I do think back on this experience pretty often. So when I was in elementary school. Apparently, this is the story my mother tells me, that there was a student on the bus that I took the bus with who was like made fun of pretty often, and I would stand up for him. And she met up with him years later at the grocery store. I don't remember him. I don't remember his name or anything, but he remembered me. And I remember my mom and I talking, and she was like, "Oh, you had a really impactful um, conversation and supported him, and he just remembered you and how you stood up for him." And I guess since then, I've always felt like, I like to stand up for the underdog a little bit.
I was gonna say, and that's in your current role here at the high school. It's kind of, I wouldn't call them the underdogs, but it's
No,
like
I mean,
but you're
maybe that's not
standing,
the right way to put
but
it, but
but you're standing up for kids that are coming in from maybe at like different programs that they were involved in, or kids that have had a difficult time at the high school or outside of the high school. So you kind of are now doing that here at Emmaus, and hopefully those students will remember your name, or you'll remember who they are as
yeah.
you kind of go through. So you're finishing up your first full year here at Emmaus High School in the STEP program. If for students and for people that are listening that aren't familiar with what that is, could you give a little bit of a description of what it is you do here?
So the STEP program is a place where students can go who might need some extra support. Um, we do a variety of things in there. We learn about coping strategies. We also focus on some executive functioning skills. And then what that means really is like organization, helping kids with organization if they owe missed work, or maybe they're having some challenges with a particular class. I might set up a meeting with their regular education teacher and talk with them about what challenges that student might have in there and how we can help them to be successful.
And it's a new program here at the high school. So it's interesting. Like, it's a program that I think we've needed for a long time. And thankfully you've come aboard this year to kind of be that bridge for a lot of students that need some, maybe need an additional support, or maybe need that, refresher on some of those skills. Before you came, you were at the IU and you were
Yes.
listed as a resiliency teacher.
Right.
So what is a resiliency teacher? Because I think that's kind of an interesting title to have. And I think that's a skill that, ninth graders, all high schoolers, maybe adult, like I think everyone needs a little bit more resiliency, like myself included. So like, what is that? And how did you bring like your stuff from that into your current spot?
Sure. So I totally agree with you. Resiliency is something that everyone needs. Resiliency, for those of you who might not be familiar with what it is, resiliency is someone's ability to not sometimes people look at it as like a bounce back. I don't call it a bounce back. The definition has been changed a little bit. So resiliency is in the face of a challenge, learning to adapt, grow, and change. So you adapt, grow, and change based on challenges that you might face in your life. And so that is what is considered a resilient individual. And I think that one of the great things about resiliency is that you can build it throughout your entire life. The earlier that you start, like in ninth grade, the easier it is to become more resilient. Of course, anyone can learn to be resilient because the brain has a lot of neuroplasticity. I don't know how much brain knowledge you want to get into there, but
That's a big fancy word.
yeah. So neuroplasticity basically means that your brain can adapt and change and grow and learn in new ways. So one of the things that we do in the STEP program is think about our thinking. So we think about the way that we might have thought about something in the past, see if we can change how we think about it to adapt it in a way that would be helpful for us so that we can grow and overcome maybe a challenge that comes our way.
And I think that's such an important thing for high schoolers, of all grade levels to be able to do, because they're just constantly faced with challenging situations, no matter what situation they're in, whether it's personal, social, academic, as they
Absolutely.
kind of move along here, the challenges of, applying to college, thinking about a job, like maybe
Mhm.
you're caring for brothers or sisters at home. There's so many things that I think all the students deal and go through, like, that we as teachers sometimes don't even know that that's happening for them or with them. So it's like teaching them the skills, while it seems kind of like maybe not always, it doesn't seem like there's always like that return on the investment. Like, you never know when the students are going to need that
Mhm.
skill to be able to like use it and display it.
I mean, absolutely. So, I mean, it's proven through science that everyone will go through some sort of personal challenge at some point in their life, and maybe more than one or multiple challenges, some small, like some of what you've described, and then some that might be even larger than that, really difficult challenges. So, as much as possible, you want to be working on building your resiliency while you're in what I would say is a mentally healthy state where you're not working on a challenge. So if you don't have a whole lot of big challenges in front of you, that is the time to practice your resiliency so that you can build it up for when something more difficult might come your way.
And it's interesting you use the word practice. A lot of times on the show, we have athletes and other people, and, they talk about having to go to practice. But I think a lot of times students don't recognize like things related to mental health take practice. Like you're not innately knowledgeable on how to overcome a stressful situation. You're not innately able to figure out how to deal with, the stresses of taking care of a brother or sister when you want to go hang out with your friends on the weekend. Like
Right.
there's a lot of that. And I think that practice is important. And I think that's one of the things that I know that you said that you kind of work with students on is practicing those skills and kind of being able to give them the thing. Cause the last thing, like when you're in the middle of a crisis, like you can't practice the skills then, you need the skills. So like practicing those skills is super important.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So one of the things we wanted to focus on here today, at the end of May in the Mental Health Awareness Month, the district has been putting things out about like suicide prevention and other things. Like we've had some events here at the high school, like talking about, those kinds of things and other mental health issues. But we wanted to kind of focus today a little bit different, maybe not so much talking about those like traumatic experiences, but focusing more on like how to have positive experiences and the importance of the positive experiences and what they can do for your mental health as well. So it's not a very fancy term like metacognition or something, but these are called positive childhood experiences. And I think this is a subject that you're pretty passionate about, kind of talking about and looking at why that's important. So for the students, for anyone, listening, describe what positive childhood experiences are.
Okay, so positive childhood experiences came about after a study that was done where they looked at adverse childhood experiences, and they said, well, if these are the things that can be harmful for children, what are the things that are going to help children and really anyone to be successful in life? And so the positive childhood experiences came out, I think in 2018 or 2019. And the research identified 7 different areas that are beneficial for children that you can get support from your teachers. But one of the things that I think is really interesting is that you can develop some of these for yourself. And I think that's one of the things I want to promote and talk about today is how you can make these positive experiences happen in your own life. And the younger that they start, the better off you're going to be. And they have a lot of benefits. I just kind of wrote down some of the benefits so I wouldn't forget. So the benefits of positive childhood experiences include decreases in depression and other mental health concerns. So that's where we're at today. Reduces school suspensions in school. Hopefully no one's there, but it does reduce that.
Yep.
Increases in overall good health. It's most impactful for students who've had negative experiences. So if they've had a really tough experience, say the loss of a parent, or maybe they've had a family member who's suffered from addiction, those kinds of things, those are very difficult challenges that children have faced. So those children in particular show great gains when they put those positive things in place for themselves. Increases in resilience, which is one of the things that we talked about.
Yep.
Increases in self-esteem, better relationships with just about everyone, including your teachers, your friends, your family, and increases in your academic achievement. So who wouldn't want all of those things?
Yeah, it sounds like, if we were selling $1 million program here, those are all the things that if you could bottle them up and, if somebody could just, take a magic potion and get all those things without the work, you'd be a millionaire and we'd be having a different conversation. But, these are all things that I think are crucially important to students, especially, as we go into the summer. Maybe not a lot of students are thinking about these things, but like, making sure that like when we have these positive experiences or these things that kind of shape us, like how do they kind of influence us even going forward? So
Sure.
I do have the list of the 7 things here. So
Yeah,
what we can do is we can kind of just run through them. I'll kind of give
absolutely.
you one. You can we can talk a little bit about them, or you can go into in depth with some of them if
Right.
you'd like.
Mhm.
Um, and I
Absolutely.
know some of them are things we focused on a lot here at the high school. So the first one of the positive, the steps is, or one of the positive childhood experiences is feeling able to talk to your family about feelings. Now that
Right.
one is definitely, there's a lot going on there and a lot of stuff that we can't necessarily control here at the school. But
Right.
if you were to kind of give a little bit of a summary on that one, or the benefits for that, what would you say for that one?
Sure. So I think one of the things is, in order to talk about your feelings, you kind of have to know where they are. So understanding, do you have a good understanding of what the 6 basic emotions are? If you saw that movie Inside Out, it talks about the actual 6 basic emotions, which are sorrow, fear, anger, disgust, and surprise. And then feelings come off of that. And so I would say make sure that you have a good feelings vocabulary. So and I always say to students, okay, so like, are you angry or are you irate? Because if you're angry, that means, maybe we can talk in a couple of minutes. But if you're irate, which means like really super angry, and you probably are like it's very difficult for you to talk right now, we might have to talk about this tomorrow. And so letting other people know that, so like if I went to a family member and said, you know what, I'm feeling really irate right now, they would know how to approach you too. So I think having a good vocabulary is really important when you're able to talk to your family about your feelings. And you're actually modeling that for your family too, so that they can use that language back with you. The other thing I would say is that um, when we're talking about feelings, validating the feelings of other people. So if someone came to me and said, I'm really sad that you did that. You would validate their feelings instead of saying, well, I didn't mean to. You could say something like, well, I hear that you're really sad that this happened. So I'm acknowledging their sorrow, or that this happened, and I'm going to try hard not to do that again. And that really helps someone. It helps build that relationship between the other person. And it also, um, um, enables you to get a deeper understanding about how someone feels.
So yeah, so I think that's, a lot of stuff there to
Yes.
unpack with the family. So I want to kind of keep the family ones together. So
Sure.
we'll kind of keep those two. So, I think to go along with those, and you've talked about like expressing feelings, you've talked about, different things like that as well too. Is one of the other ones is feel that your family stood by you during difficult times. So
Right.
like you are able to talk to your family about these feelings, but then like what happens afterwards? Like, is it,
Mhm.
we have this
Mhm.
discussion and then your family ignores you, shuns you, whatever, or are they going to be accepting of you kind of there? So, what kind of things would you add in about that one?
Well, I think one of the things that I would say there is that make sure that you're advocating for yourself. That's a skill that I think is valuable for everyone. And what I mean by advocating for yourself, if you're not familiar for that, is with that is like, asking for what you actually need. So like, I feel sad right now and I need you to please give me some space and time. And then I would like you to check in on me maybe in half an hour, and we can have this conversation. So now I'm able to talk about my feelings, and I feel stood by with my family because I know in half an hour they're going to come back and check on me because that's what we've agreed on. So again, building that relationship. And it's my hope that that would happen. I mean, just like there are all different kinds of families, I do want to acknowledge that some children have different kinds of family and home life, and some feel more supported than others. But I think advocating for yourself is really important because it's hard for someone to know what you need until you actually express it.
Yeah, and that's something too that like a lot of times people don't think that like, people aren't mind readers, and it's tough, like
Mhm.
especially like in the school setting where we might not always know how a student feels. Like, if a student comes into school and displays no visible signs of being upset, but then they go home. It's like the classic, like they're great in school, but at home they lash out all the time. And, we don't know that happens. So, being able to express those feelings and those, things, and being able to have somebody that stands by you kind of ties in with one of the other ones to feel safe and protected by an adult in your home. So I think like those three kind of go together, because if you don't feel safe, I don't know if you were able to tell, like, if you don't feel safe, then obviously telling your family about your feelings might not be on the top of your priority list. And then, without that, then you're probably not going to feel like they stand by you in difficult times. So, the family safety one is it's a huge topic of like, what does that sound like, or look like? But, in a quick, like, kind of thing, like family safety in relation to all these kinds of things, and like establishing that relationship with your family, like, what would you have to say? What kind of a tip or strategy for that one?
Sure. So I'll just kind of break safety apart a little bit. I think you had kind of alluded to it when you said safe to express your feelings. So we're not just talking about physical safety here, although I would hope that would be the case, but we're talking about emotional and psychological safety. Do I feel safe to tell you some of my real concerns in a way that I think you're going to be open to? And that's a tough one, because I feel like it's part of a basic need that children have to be safe. And one of the things that I always tell students is, if nothing else, you should create your own personal safety plan. And what that means is, like, what can you do? What can you say to yourself? What can you do to keep yourself physically or emotionally safe? So if I'm in a heated conversation and I'm not feeling emotionally safe, can I say, you know what? I feel like I really need a break right now. I'm going to step away and I'm going to come back at a later time. Or maybe you have a positive mantra that you want to say to yourself. I did have a positive mantra when I was in college, going back for the second time, and it did help me. So I would say, that sort of thing. I even got it on a bookmark and I kept it with me.
Well, you're not going to be able to now not tell us what it is. What is it?
It was never, never, never give up, from Winston Churchill.
There you go. So,
Yeah.
and I think, again, that's something that I've, in getting to know you a little bit and kind of seeing the work that you do with the students that are in your program, I think I'm sure that comes through, because, seeing the resiliency and what you're asking students in that program to do is, sometimes it takes three nevers to give up, in a situation. So, I think that's a really important skill. Kind of, we're talking about a lot of great things here that students can and should and could be working on their own to kind of get those things in place as well. So we have the family ones kind of knocked out, but I think the other four that are there can kind of tie into like your life here at school and kind of how those kind of all come together. So, I think one that as a school community we focused a lot on this year has been the feeling a sense of belonging in high school. And this one is definitely one that, if we wanted to break this out and have a 45-minute separate conversation on this one, I think this would be we definitely could. We're not going to do that right now, because that would just be an entirely too long podcast for this. But I think that's one that we've really focused a lot on, is finding your people and finding, some of the other ones we'll talk about later also tie into those, finding the community. But, for students that you've had, or students that, maybe you haven't had, what would you say to students in relation to finding that, sense of belonging here at the high school?
Well, I think one of the things is finding a group of people who has similar or like-minded ethical and moral values to your own, or that always strikes me as something like a friend group would have. The other thing that you could do for sense of belonging would be like joining clubs and sports. That's where you get some of that like-mindedness. And then feeling like the belonging piece comes in where you actually contribute. So without you in the group, the group would not be who it is. So that's what they mean by the sense of belonging there. So finding that, maybe it's through activities, maybe it's through a club, maybe it's through your Hornet homeroom. What group do you feel that you are a part of in a way that the group really needs you to contribute?
I think that's a good way to put it. Like, I don't know if I've ever really heard it like that, where like belonging, obviously joining all the clubs and being, all those different things, but like could this function without you? Now, I'm not saying like that,
Mm.
Club X would immediately fall off the face of the earth if you weren't a part of it, but bringing your unique sense of self to it, or
Yes.
bringing, your perspective on things. Like we talk about that a lot. And especially with how diverse our student population is that we have, all different people from all different walks of life. Like, probably a lot different from our school experience where it was very, very a lot of the same-ish type people going
Right.
through. So definitely a much larger environment here at the high school. So I like that sense of belonging, like actually feeling like you're contributing or being a vital member of the group. And I think that kind of leads into the, like, I'll combine these two together a little bit here of, feeling supported by your friends and having at least two non-parent adults who took a genuine interest in you. And I think those kind of, when students find that group or find those people, like you find supportive friends. And a lot of times if it's a club member or like a club advisor, a coach, could be a teacher, could be, I know a lot of students have, our staff assistants this year have gotten a lot, we've gotten a lot of people in the building to connect with adults. And I think that we've really kind of encouraged students to do that. So combining the support of friends and non-parent adults in a school setting, like, obviously getting involved in those organizations, but, what are the benefits of those two things?
So, I mean, I think that, well, they lead back to the benefits that we talked about, especially the resiliency. But one of the things that I think is unique about the friendship part, because like, not just from a club standpoint, but what skill set do you have to make friends? So kids might want to ask themselves that. So do you have the emotional vocabulary? Do you know how to strike up a conversation with someone? If you don't, can you practice? Can you watch a YouTube video about that? Do you know how to understand and read body language in a way that lets me have a deeper understanding? Because, we know a lot of conversation is that way. So if you don't have a good friend group, or you feel like you'd like to expand your friend group, those would be skills that I would say kids should be looking at and trying to practice on their own or watch videos about. And do they also know how to actively listen? So when you're in a relationship with someone, whether it's an adult or a peer, do you know how to wait your turn, really empathetically listen? Or are you listening for the break in the conversation so that you can say what you wanted to say? Or are you listening to really understand the other person? So these are skills that fall underneath, I would call them executive functioning skills, that help you to build these protective factors in.
And I would say those are skills, again, like coming to that practice thing, like how to be a listener. Like, I think we talk about that a lot of like, make sure you're listening to the teacher, but like, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean to listen? Like I always get tripped up on like, and this is not related to like making friends and stuff, but like when kids say, I like this, like, I know how to study. And then you ask them, how do you study? And it's like, well, I stare at the page and hope that it goes into my brain. Well, that's not studying. There's, lots of different things, but like, when it comes to this, like, hopefully students are still listening to the conversation here. But when you said like, I'm going to go onto YouTube and watch people have conversations, like as a high school student, I'm thinking like, man, that's probably pretty lame. I would laugh at that. But at the same time, like, I think a lot of people learn how to do lots of things through YouTube, but I don't think a lot of times they would even think of like how to have a conversation, how to be a good listener. Cause you see all these conversations in the hallways and it is literally like, who can scream the loudest over the next person to be heard? And there's not a lot of like conversations happening. It's a lot of like, I don't know, I guess like kids like parallel play. It's like everyone's having their own separate conversations at the same time. So, those are really important skills. And I think, if you talk to adults here at the high school, I think those are skills that I think everyone wishes that we could expand all students' abilities to do.
Well, and not just students. I'll say that some of the skills and these strategies that we're talking about are good for overall lifetime success. So people who put these kinds of practices into place are going to end up with more opportunities for jobs, better employment, a more authentic friend group in adulthood, and a more satisfied and beneficial overall life. I don't know how else to say it other than that.
Again, you have all the secrets here. Hopefully people are going to listen all the way through. You have the $1 million ideas for lots of things here. But yeah, like it's just, we spend a lot of our time with the academic part, obviously, because that's the most important part
course.
of school. But then these conversations are being heightened, especially after coming back from, the last couple of years and what that did or didn't do to kids and, getting them to reacclimate. And, I'm sure, if you're a teacher or if you're a student, you've been in the classroom where it's like, hey, here's 5 minutes of a break and everyone's immediately on their phone and no one's interacting with the people around them, getting them to like have those skills to be in a friend group, I think is, something that has to kind of almost be relearned, especially even here at the high school. Cause some of them are just kind of, this is one of the first air quotes normalish years that we've had in a couple years to be able to like reestablish those connections and being able to talk to people and all those different things. So I think, all this conversation about friends and trying to develop like those social skills and the executive functioning skills, I think is invaluable. And again, I don't know if it's a lot of times when, when you hear like mental health awareness month, like you think of the bigger things that usually come, but like these skills, like all of these things contribute to your mental health as well too. Like if you don't have friends or you feel like you're a loner or you can't make friends, like obviously that's going to have a huge impact on your mental health overall.
Yep, absolutely.
So the last one, and this kind of goes into our summer conversation here, is, how do you then take these skills from out of the school and out of your family? And the last one is like enjoying participating in community traditions. Now, there are things at the school that are community traditions too, but like maybe you're involved in a church group, maybe you're involved in a social group, scout group. Maybe you are part of a summer program. Maybe you're an employee at Dorney Park, not that that's a whole lot of tradition, but hey, it feels like, it's a rite of passage to work at like, an amusement park or Rita's Water Ice, something like that. So like as students are kind of now transitioning to, their communities and, after in the next couple of weeks, what would you say about kind of getting into that mindset and that frame of like, so now I have these skills, I worked on them here at school, but then how do I take them and apply them to, the rest of my life? Big idea, but like, so that I'm not just, snapping my friends all summer and then playing video games and then, coming out when it's like 2 a.m. to eat some food or something.
Right. So, I mean, community, when they talk about community in this research study, they're talking about the community at large. So it could be a school community, it could be a classroom community, or it could be like the Emmaus community and beyond. And so they're also talking about the community that you might build culturally. So they're talking about your cultural community also. So thinking about like sports and clubs, you kind of touched on that as part of like a school community, but maybe there's outside ones as well. Volunteering. I know a lot of kids don't think about that, but like that's being a part of your community. One of the things that we look at, not just from this study, but for other studies, is like when you give back, show gratitude, and you give to others, that is part of contributing towards your community. It's actually a win-win for the community, but it actually builds your self-advocacy, your self-esteem, and your overall well-being. So we know that just like I always tell my students, a good example is like, how do you feel when you give a gift to somebody that you care about? You feel just as good generally as the person that you give it to.
Yeah. And I think that especially in the life of a teenager, I think having that like, I think a lot of the stuff that they see on social media is all about like, what can I get? How can I get it? But then, you have these experiences where you're able to contribute to the community, you're able to help somebody out. And it doesn't have to be this grand gesture, it could be something as silly as going to mow an elderly neighbor's lawn, or like, helping out by like, maybe like we referenced this earlier, but like, and it's not necessarily community service, but like watching your brother or sister during the day because maybe a parent works or both parents work. Those are the kinds of things that, doesn't necessarily show up in your bank account or maybe on a resume for college or something, but these are the kind of things that like allow you to kind of grow and, have these positive experiences.
Yeah. And I don't know what kind of events like Emmaus has as far as like fairs or other things, but thinking about too your culture and how you can share your culture with your community, I think is really important as well. So do you want to learn the language of your culture? Is there something specific like that you would say about your culture that you think would be beneficial to this area, that you would want to educate? Maybe there's like a library program. I don't know what's involved in that, but there's generally things and different avenues that you can share something about yourself and give a little piece of your background and knowledge. And I think that that is a really nice way to um, contribute towards your community and really help your community to grow and be more diverse.
Yeah. And I think just, kind of trying to tie it all together, I think, all these different things that you've talked about are just trying to make you a better person so that you can then go out and be a better person for the people around you or in your family or in your community. And, you know, again, mental health doesn't have to be this like grand, like, oh my gosh, I'm in counseling 3 days a week and I need to do that. Like,
Right.
I think a lot of times students have that impression of mental health, but it's like these small things, like you were saying, like the small things of practice and gratitude and resiliency that then allow you to kind of, build that stamina to do that. And then you have the opportunity to kind of know what it feels like to do that. Where then if you're in a situation where like you really need like help, mental health help, then you kind of know the difference between all of these different things. And again, that's another large conversation as to when do I need help, not necessarily for right now, but like I think these are like steps in kind of trying to help you to kind of work through some of these things before, it gets to this major issue.
I agree. And I think it's really important that, one of the reasons that we talked about it, and I'll just kind of, plug these positive experiences again, is kind of like, they don't have to be things that are set in place for you. You can set them in place for yourself
Yeah.
if they're not there. And I think that it can so improve the trajectory of your lifetime success that it's worth your effort in trying. And I just feel strongly that, I want everyone to try and live their best life by sharing some of this knowledge. I know that sounds kind of like big grand scheme, like, I guess utopian. But I do feel that way. Having had this knowledge and having had some of this training, I feel it's part of my responsibility to share it with others, because once you see it like this, you can't unsee it.
Yeah, like, and especially like when you're dealing and working with students that are struggling in these areas, you want to help them as best you can. And then, you want to make sure that you're trying to give them all the necessary skills and different, strategies in order to do that. And, that's a whole nother, again, I keep saying we're have a whole nother conversation. Maybe this is like going to have to be like a running segment for next year's podcast episodes, talking about all these different things, because I think it's, you know, just like a lot of other things that we celebrate for just 1 month at a time. Like mental health isn't something that like, we're recording this on May 31st. So, June 1st tomorrow doesn't mean, oh, mental health is over, I'm good. We'll come back to it next May in 2024. Wow. And then we'll figure out, we'll figure it out then. It's like one of these things that's continuous. So, like saying that. So like if you were to give students a suggestion or a couple suggestions on like how to work on this over the summer, or like, they're so bored with watching Friends for the 10th time that, maybe it's like time to do something a little bit different. So what would be a couple of things that you would suggest for students to kind of focus on during the summer, or even for parents to kind of help their students focus on, or anyone that's listening, like focus on these things for the summer?
I think one of the first things is one of the ones that we actually went back to in the very beginning, which is being able to identify your own feelings. So I think that that really opens the avenue for conversation. So I find that a lot of people are still using, like I said, vocabulary that's maybe not very descriptive of actually how they're really feeling. And in order for someone to understand you better, that will be something. So there's like those big vocabulary feelings wheels. And so I would say, kind of looking at some of those things, or when you feel tempted to use one of those words, maybe you could have like a family challenge. What would you say that would be a word that's similar but is more descriptive of that? The other thing I probably would say is like try and get involved. Try and get involved with other people. Sitting alone in your house playing video games is not good for your mental health. Even if you're talking with friends while you're playing video games, because you can't see their face, you can't make the eye connection. There's actually there's, like I said, we could have probably other conversations about that. But when you have a conversation with a person who's in front of you, it actually does something to improve the positive feelings, the chemicals that we produce in our brains when we have conversation, back and forth conversation, which makes us feel better and more connected with another person. And so we can't do that on the phone, or unless maybe FaceTime, but even then I think it's tough. Or just like video chatting or texting. That's why I'm a huge advocate for practicing this with another live person in front of you.
Yeah, definitely. And, there's opportunity to work on those skills this summer. Is there any sort of like resources, websites, anything that you would direct people to that would be, a good place to do those kind of things? Like,
I don't know. I'd have to think about that one a little bit. There certainly is a lot out there. I mean, I know the positive childhood experiences are, the study has been shown on a couple of different websites. There's a lot of information, believe it or not, on the CDC website about building resiliency and positive childhood experiences. There's also a website called the PACEs Connection, which is the Positive Childhood Experiences Connection. And there's a lot of information there. That's probably more for adults than children. Although it would be a great starting point for parents to look for information on both of those. One of the things that I would say is really important too is like just having, they say it's critical to have a 15-minute conversation every day with your child. And so if you haven't had that opportunity, you can build that for yourself as a teenager too. Make sure that you're talking to your parents authentically for at least 15 minutes a day. It's good for their mental health and yours.
I think that's a great suggestion to kind of end on here. That's something that's manageable. 15 minutes a day is not too much. But I think there's lots of great, things we talked about in this entire episode. So, it'll be a chore to listen to this one. It's a little bit longer than our normal ones, but that's okay, because I think, there's so many good things and so many things that are out there that can help students that, I think a lot of times students don't know, and they just don't think about these things. They're so wrapped up in their world of whatever that looks like that they don't take the time to like step out and, even if one person hears this and be like, you know what, maybe I'll try that, or maybe I'll have that 15-minute conversation, or maybe they can't have 15, maybe it's 5, maybe it goes from 0 to 5. That's still progress for, having conversations with other people at the time. So, I think you talked about a lot of great things here. Is there anything else you want to add in about positive childhood experiences?
No, I mean, I guess I just wish I would have had the training sooner. If I had known this myself as a kid, I often think about what my trajectory would be like. Not that I'm happy where I am and everything, but I often wonder that for a lot of people, like if they had known this younger in like their freshman year, what would their trajectory have been like?
And now you have the knowledge. So hopefully if you're listening or watching this, wherever we're posting all this stuff, that you have these, the beginnings of the conversation. This is the beginnings of, educating and kind of getting all the word out about this stuff. So Miss Lamparella, thanks a lot for joining us. A lot to take into the summer here. It might take the whole summer to process some of it, but I think a lot of what we talked about here is good stuff. And I am not kidding around. I think, this could be the beginning of something where you do come on semi-regularly and talk to students and the parents, because you've displayed like the passion for this, and it's an important topic, and it's one that, we talk a lot about, but then maybe giving students this strategy. So I'm not putting you on, on the record for anything, but since it's now on the podcast, it has to happen. So.
I would love to do that.
So yeah,
it's my thing.
So thanks a lot for joining us. Have a lovely summer, and we got a couple days here to close it out. So I guess we have to go do that, since if you're listening, you've heard the bell ring twice. So I think that means it's time for us to go somewhere else but here. But thanks a lot for joining us.
Thank you.